Hello friends, welcome to smashtheshell. I am Amit Kumar and in this video tutorial we are going to build this awesome responsive form without using media queries at all. So we are not going to write any single line of media query to build this form. So now when you go ahead and type something in here and when you hit tab, you're gonna see how it's going to change its color from red or warm color to kind of a cooler color, and how these buttons are going to behave and how you can go ahead and animate the gradient. So there is a lot of things that you can learn by watching this video tutorial. So I highly recommend that you just go ahead and watch this video tutorial to learn a lot of tricks that can help you to further improve your own projects. So you can see that how this form is responding to the size of the browser's viewport. So my friends, let's go ahead and get started. Let me show you what we have right now to get started with. You can see that we have a very simple HTML document, index.html document. We have a style.css file and we have a script.js file. Now here you can see that I have a form inside this article element, and if you look at the preview of this form, this is how it looks. It is very simple form with two input elements, email and password, with few links and a login button. So that's all we have right now to get started with. Let me explain you this markup a bit. We have an input container for each of these two inputs, and these inputs are associated with their own labels, like email address for the email input and password for the password input. And I'm also using the id and 4 attributes for the input and label elements respectively to kind of associate the label with its own input. And if you look at the preview and when you click on this email address or password, you're gonna see how the inputs are going to be focused. So now let's move to the CSS file, which I have already linked to this document here. And you can also see that I'm using the Google fonts, and that is Joseph in Sans. And when you go to the style.css file here, you can see that I'm importing some colors by using the CSS custom properties or CSS variables. And also you can see that I'm kind of resetting the margins and paddings of each element on the page and applying the box sizing to the border box by inheriting it from the root element. So that is very simple and easy to understand. And here I am setting the font family to the Joseph in Sans. Now let's go ahead and split these two windows. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to apply a background, and I want to use a linear gradient. So I will say linear gradient and where warm color 1 comma where warm color 2. That's it. And we also needed to give it a direction of 105 degree. Hit save and you're gonna see that you have applied your gradient. That's really awesome. Now let's go ahead and apply a fallback color if your browser doesn't support the gradient. So I'm just simply going to copy this where warm color 1 and paste it before the linear gradient. Now let's go ahead and target the section element of the page so that we can center this content both horizontally and vertically. So I'm going to say width 100 VH, height 100 VH, actually it's VW, viewport width, and display to flex, justify content center, align item center, and hit save. Now you're gonna see it has been centered both horizontally and vertically. Now let's go ahead and target the article. So section, then inside that we're gonna find the article and set its background to white color. So I'm gonna use the white color, and I want to give it a border radius of 0.5 ems, also padding to 3 ems from top and bottom and 2.5 ems from left and right. Hit save and you're gonna see the changes like that. Great. Now I wanna style the heading, so I can say article h2, set its font size to calc 1.5 rem plus 1 vw, which means I'm using the responsive font size and I don't need to use the media query if I'm doing this. So let's go ahead and apply a margin bottom to 1.3 ems. And if you want some more explanation about this font size, let me explain you. We are using the 1.5 rems of minimum font size plus 1% of the current viewport size. So the minimum font size will always be 1.5 rems, no matter what size of viewport you are using, plus 1% of the current viewport size. That's it. Now let's move to the other elements. I'm going to give it select the form element and set its width to kind of 48 vmin, which means I'm setting the width to whatever would be the minimum viewport size, whether it's height or width. So hit save and you're gonna see we have applied the width to our form. That's amazing. Now let's go ahead and kind of center this text. So I can say text align center, and it's gonna center the heading. Great. Let's go ahead and move forward. Now it's time to go ahead and style these input elements. So let's do that quickly. Target the email and password. I have already applied these classes to each of these input elements, so I can simply select by using these class selectors. So I'm going to say display block. I want to set it a width of 100%, padding to 0.5 ems for top and bottom and 0 for left and right. Hit save. Let's go ahead and give it a font size. So, and the padding is going to calculate it using this font size. So I'm gonna say calc 0.5 rem of minimum font size plus 1% of the current viewport size. So that's it. And I don't want these default borders, so I'm going to set it to none and I'm going to apply my own border. So border bottom 1 pixel, actually 1 pixel solid where light color. So hit save and you're gonna see something like that. And now we want to use these labels as a placeholder for this input. So let's go ahead and place them at their right place, and I mean in the center of these two inputs. So before that we are going to kind of remove this outline so you can't see that. That's great. Now let's move to the labels and center them vertically inside these input containers. So I'm gonna say input container and set its value to position relative. Great. And now you can say input container, then label, and you can say its position to absolute. Also set its left value to 0, top to 50%, and translate y to -50% to send it back into the center of these input containers, and you wanna see how it's looking. That's perfect. Now that I want some margin between these two input containers, so I can use lobotomized lobotomized selector like that, input container, and we can say margin top 3 ems, and it's gonna give this bit of space in between these two input elements. Now it's time to go ahead and create some custom borders for the filled and focus input state of these input elements. So I can say input container, and before elements pseudo element selector, and set its content to empty, set its display to block, and I can also say height to 2 pixel. That's what I want for this, and width to 100%, and set its background image to a gradient. So the gradient I'm going to use here is that linear gradient, and I want to set its rotation to 75 degree, and the color should be something like that. Let's set where cool color 2, then where cool color 1, and similarly where warm color 1, comma where warm color 2. So I'm using 4 color stops for this gradient, and hit save, and now you're gonna see that we have created kind of the custom borders. Now we want to set its position to absolute so that I can position this before pseudo element selector in context with its on parent element, which is input container. Simple as that. Now let's set its left to 0 and bottom value to 0, and you can say margin auto, and it's going to place the custom borders direct above the light gray borders. Isn't that simple? Now let's go ahead and utilize the background size just to show the first set of gradients, which is cool color. So I can say background size to 300% like this, and it's only going to show the cool colors right here. And if you set its background position to left, you're gonna see it will be still the same. And we are going to use this background position to kind of animate these gradients. So whenever I kind of click in these input elements, I want these borders to be sliding from left to right by kind of changing their colors. So what we can do is that we can say input container, then we can use the focus within, and we can say before pseudo element selector. And first of all, we have to kind of send these borders to back or resize them to 0. So, and then when we focus on these inputs, we are simply going to kind of resize them back to 1 by using the transform. So I can say transform and set its scale x value to 0, and transform origin should be left center like that, and hit save. As soon as you hit save, it's going to be disappeared. Now when I focus on these input elements, I want to come back. So inside this selector, I can say transform scale x and set its value to 1. So as soon as I do that and apply some transition so that it transitions smoothly, so I can say transition and 0.3 seconds transform to is in out function, and simply hit save. Can you see that? We are only seeing the one set of variables. Now when we are in the focus state or fill state, focus state, we want the gradients to be warm color set. So what we can say here is that we can simply set its background position inside the focus within state, and say right position right, and inside this input before container before element I can also kind of animate the background position or transition it like background position, and we can say the duration should be 0.3 seconds is in out. So when you just go ahead and click on these input elements, see how they are transitioning from cool colors to warm colors like that. That's really cool. So now let's go ahead and start styling the links and buttons. I have already created the class reset password, and I'm gonna set its display property to block and set its text align to right. Also, let's go ahead and target the btn class for the button, and we can say its display property to block, and I want to set its margin to 0 auto. Instead of 0, let's go ahead and give it some margin, so maybe 1.5 ems, and I also want to give some margin for the reset password, so I can say margin top 1.5 ems, and I want to remove the text decoration from the reset password and set it to none. Hit save, and you're gonna see something like that. Great. And let's go ahead and style the button. So I'm gonna say border none, background should be a gradient, so I can simply copy the gradients that I have used for the borders. So simply copy this gradient and just paste it right there. Hit save, and you see the gradient. Let's give some breathing room, so I can say padding 0.5 ems from top and bottom, and maybe 2.5 ems from left and right. So you wanna see something like that, and this padding is based on the font size that I'm applying here. So font size should be a responsive font size, so 0.5 rem plus 1 viewport, 1% of the current viewport size. So this should be the font size. So I think it's font size actually. Hit save, and you're gonna see the changes. And here I want to have 0.8 ems for the top and bottom, and let's give it a border radius of maybe 2.5 ems and 3 ems. Yeah, that's good. I want to change the color, so I can say color to FFF, which means white, and I just want to use the cool color stops for the default button state. So I can say background size and set its value to 400%, and set its background position to its default, which is left. And when I hover over this button, I want to switch it to warm color, so I can say btn hover and set its background position to right, and I want to apply some transition, so I can say transition 0.3 second background position, and set its function to timing function to ease in out. So you're gonna see how smoothly it's going to transition between two gradients. And if you want to learn this technique in more detail, you can find the tutorial link in the description, and I'm also putting that link as a card in this video. You can find that on the top right corner of this video. Now let's go ahead and style the paragraph so that you can see here. So I can say article p and set its text align property to center, and margin top and bottom to 2 ems and left and right to 0. So it will look something like that. And I think instead of applying the margin to top and bottom to 2 ems, I think we should just apply margin top to 3 ems and remove the other values, and we're gonna see changes like this, and that is looking awesome right now. What I want to do here is that I can say article and register and simply say text decoration none, and it's gonna remove that underline. Good. And now my friends, we want to kind of put the bubbles that we see on the actual form. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to target the article pseudo element selectors like before and after. So I can say article after and simply set its content to empty, set its display property, and I'm gonna set it to block. Width should be 8 ems, height should be 8 ems, and background color would be my color variable that I'm using above, and that is where warm color 2. Great. Now let's go ahead and apply the border radius of 50% and hit save to see the results. So now that we have created 2 bubbles or circles, I'm gonna go ahead and reduce its opacity to 0.1, and I want to position them in context with the actual article element. So I can go to the top and select the article, that is this one, and set it position to relative and move to this again, and I can say select each of these circles individually and place them inside that container. So I can say article before, and I can set its right value to -2 ems and top value to also -2 ems. Hit save, and to set these right and top values, you need to set the position of these 2 article pseudo element selectors to absolute. So I can say position absolute, and now hit save. You're gonna see that it is placed on the top right corner, and I can just increase the opacity a bit to something like that. And let's target the other one. I can say article after and set its left to -2 ems and top to also -2 ems, but this time I want to reduce the size or width of these 2 bubbles. So I can say width to 6 ems, height to 6 ems, and hit save. Actually this should be to the bottom, so I can say bottom. Okay, now guys, you can see that these are kind of leaking out of their containers, so that's a very easy fix. Go to the article selector and set its value to overflow hidden. Now you can see that they are not leaking or overflowing out of its container. That's awesome. So now my friends, we have designed a very beautiful form. Now it's time to go ahead and add some functionality to these labels and input elements. So we will be using JavaScript for that. What I want is that I want to click on this label, and as soon as I do click, it should be focused inside this element, as you can see right now. And when I leave this input, it should still stay here when the input is already filled. And the other thing I want is that I want to move the label at top so that I can easily type here without the interference of this label element, as it is doing right now. So we have these 2 problems to tackle. let's go ahead and see how we're gonna do that. First of all, let's go ahead and move to the index.html file, and here we want to add a class of focus like that. Hit save, and you can also put it here. Later on we are going to put these classes here dynamically using JavaScript, but for now let's go ahead and do that and save the file. Go to the style.css file, move down a bit, and here say focused, and simply target the label element and set its transform and translate y to -200% and hit save. Now it's gonna transform to the top. Let's apply transition to the label element here inside the input container, and I can say transition 0.3 second, transform is in out. Alright, so you can see that how smoothly they are transitioning to the top. Now the other requirement is that when these input fields are focused, we want to put a orange kind of gradient, and when this input is filled, we want to put a blue border, and we want that border to stay there even if we leave that input field. Again, go ahead and here apply another class input field, and now this input field is also going to be added by JavaScript dynamically, but for now let's put it here and hit save. Go to the style.css file, and you can say actually let's move to the top, and you're gonna find this selector. Just direct beneath this selector you can say input field and input container, and we can say focus within before, and just simply say background position left, and we also want to transform to scale x1, hit save, and which means when we put some value here it should be there. I think we don't need this focus within, and hit save. Now you're gonna see that we have this blue border, and when you go to the index.html and copy this input field and apply it here, you're gonna see these two borders are appearing. So now let's go ahead and add these classes dynamically using JavaScript. So let's go ahead and remove these classes from here and save it. Go to the script.js. Now here we want to create a constant variable input list where we will be selecting all the input elements. So document.query selector all, and I can say input container and input, which means I'm selecting only input elements which are inside the input container. Hit save and apply for each function on each of these input items or node list. So I can say input list and function, and inside this function I want to pass an parameter called input item, and say this actually not this input item dot add event listener, and set a focus event listener on this and call function, and I want to say this dot parent element, and the parent element of the current input element will be the input container. So class list dot add, and we want to add focus class. So it's going to dynamically add the focused class on the input container when I focus on this element. And if you right click on it and say inspect, you're gonna see that focus has been indeed added. Now let's go ahead and add another event listener. You can say input item add event listener, and this time we are going to add blur, which means when we are leaving the input element. So I can say function, and inside here I want to say this I want to check if the input field is empty or not. So I can say if this dot value dot length equal to 0, which means the field is empty. So at this point of time I want to say this dot parent element dot class list dot remove focus. So if the element is empty, I want to remove the focus class, and at the same time if it is empty I also want to remove the input field class, but I want to add the class when the element is filled. So I can say else I want to copy this whole line and paste it here, and instead of remove say add, and hit save. Now click here, you're gonna see that how the label is moving at the top, and when you fill this you're gonna see that the border stays there and turned into blue color like that. So that's what we wanted. So my friends, we have created the functionality for these input labels also, and we can put our email address, and you can put the password here, and you're gonna see that how they are staying, and you can hover on these buttons, but when I hover on these links I can't see anything. So let's move to the CSS and quickly do that. You can simply say reset password and select it the hover and say color to where warm color 2, hit save, and do the same for the register link. So I'm also going to say register and hit save, and you're gonna see how they are turning into warm color. Okay, so now my friends, we have styled the form completely, and you're gonna see that this form is a responsive form, and we are not using the media query to make this form responsive. We are simply relying on the font size, RAM font size, and also the size of the current viewport size. So if you go ahead and resize the kind of form, you're gonna see how the form is going to change based on the viewport size. So that is pretty awesome. So that's what I wanted to show you in this video tutorial, and this is really awesome. So friends, if you like this video and content, please go ahead and like this video and comment your thoughts in the comment section, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel for getting more awesome content like this. And one more thing you can do is that press that little bell icon so that you can get the instant notification.